but No Holds Barred is by far my favorite Hulk Hogan movie. And even all these years later, it's funny. I tried to watch 2 minutes of All Elite Wrestling this week for the Jericho Orange Cassidy match, or I actually tried to watch the whole match, which was 20 minutes, even though it was a 150-pound guy against a 250-pound guy. And it only lasted 2 minutes because it looked so phony. But a movie I've seen at least 20 times. I wanted it fresh in my mind for this review. I had no problem sitting through this. I actually enjoyed it. Funny story on how I obtained this tape. I was bouncing, and a very hot girl actually met me in a club and asked me if I would accompany her to her ex's house to pick up some stuff that she needed. I guess they used to live together, or it was an apartment. And they didn't have a good breakup, and I guess she was a little afraid he'd be abusive to her, so she just asked me, hey, would you come with me in a couple days, or it may have been the next day, to pick up her stuff. Well, I ended up going to this guy's apartment with her. She still had the key because she used to live there to get it wasn't much. It was literally just a few things. And this tape happened to be sitting on his counter, his kitchen counter. And I'd always wanted this, so I said, hey, do you mind if I take his No Holds Barred video cassette? And she said, no, do whatever you want. So, buddy, I have your cassette, and I also banged your ex. Sorry about that. It was a pretty good deal for me. But on to the actual, the movie. One of the first scenes in the movie is we see Jesse Ventura, Mean Gene Okerlund. They're at a WWE show, and Hulk Hogan, who is playing the far-fetched role of Rip, which is basically Hulk Hogan in blue tights instead of yellow tights. He's taken on Bill Eadie, the guy who was Demolition Axe, but he looks a lot different than Demolition Axe. He had a little bit different makeup. His hair was fluffy. So no one really knew it was Demolition Axe, but he confirmed to me that it was him. I did do a shoot interview with Demolition. I forget if I brought it up in that interview, but he definitely confirmed to me it was him that played the guy Hogan's wrestling as Rip. Then there we see Brell watching it. Brell is the guy from Wayne's World. He plays the role of like the producer of the Wayne's World show in the Wayne's World movie. That's probably what else he's best known for. I forget his real actor's name. But he's on the competing TV network that wants to recruit Hulk Hogan because Hulk Hogan is like the biggest wrestling star. So they want to have their own wrestling show with Hulk Hogan. Eventually, there's a scene of him bringing Hogan to the boardroom, and he presents Hogan with a blank check and says basically fill in the amount, but he's a little bit rude to Hulk. So Hulk takes the check, shoves it in his mouth, storms off. That's when the famous scene happens. Brell's limo driver takes him to like some warehouse where Hogan jumps out of the limo, beats up the guys that were going to beat him up in the warehouse, grabs a limo driver where he says that he did Dookie or something like that. And then Hogan says, Dookie? And then he does that smell, and then he drops the guy. Then we realize that these evil TV producers find this no holds barred, no rules fighting in some random bar, which really, did UFC get the idea of no holds barred? Because if you guys remember, MMA used to be called no holds barred. in the first UFC. It was no holds barred fighting in an octagon, which coincidentally they fight in an octagon in this movie. It's either ropes and tires as the corner, or an octagon ring. But you could definitely possibly think that UFC may have taken the idea for no holds barred fighting from this movie. So they kayfabe that wrestling is a work in this. The underground fighting, this Brel guy likes it. So he decides that he's going to do his own battle of the tough guys in this for his TV show and offer $100,000. By the way, when Brel's at the bar seeing this no holds barred fighting, this is where we see Stan Hansen for the first time. And I've also interviewed Stan Hansen about this movie. And I'll even put the link to that interview with Hansen in the description after I finish this. But he said he enjoyed doing the movie, but he liked his deal with Japan, basically. So he never really wanted to go to WWE for that reason, although he did get along well with Hulk Hogan. Hansen said the best memory he had of the movie is taking his daughter to watch it, who was 10 at the time, in an empty theater. And basically, when Zeus beat up Stan Hansen, the daughter cuddled up to him and said, "It's going to be okay, Daddy," or something like that. So he said that was his greatest memory from No Holds Barred. And Stan Hansen has the line in the movie about the teeny wanger or something, in referring to Brel's henchman's dick, because for some reason the bathroom in this bar has a dog in it, like a pit bull in it, and like the old style urinals where it's just, they still exist in some places where you're just all pissing and like everyone can see each other's dicks, which as I said, they still exist, but they're more rare these days. And Stan Hansen looks down and says that. But yeah, Brel comes up with the idea for the $100,000 battle of the tough guys. And Zeus, who I've also interviewed, makes his first appearance to win this battle of the tough guys, destroying everyone, collects the $100,000 prize. Meanwhile, this Samantha M. Moore appears with Rip's group, and she's like a consultant to Rick. She runs an agency for promotions, and she's helping Rip become more popular. There's that famous scene where she takes him out to dinner, and it's a fancy restaurant, and the waiter's being very rude, asking him if he wants a hamburger, but it's a new waiter, and the real staff know that he's a regular customer there. It's kind of funny with all the sexual harassment stuff going on that like Rip is like hitting on the ad agency girl right away, in behavior that today in the PC world that we live in would be considered totally unacceptable. They do one scene where for some reason they've been booked in the same hotel room, and he makes a barrier on the bed, but when he goes on the bed breaks. She rolls on top of him. Everyone remembers that scene. Also, they go out for dinner somewhere, and people try to rob the restaurant, and Rip beats up the robbers. There's a food fight. So lots of stuff going on. It turns out that this Samantha M. Moore is actually a spy from Brel. And at one point, when she realizes how nice Rip is, and then Brel actually slaps her, she confesses to Rip that she was hired by Brel, and will you please forgive her? Meanwhile, Zeus beats up Hulk Hogan's brother to the point where he's in a wheelchair after, and he's in a coma, and they think he might die. This happens after Zeus initially challenges Rip, and he doesn't want to do the fight, obviously, because he doesn't like Brel, and they beat up the brother. That finally convinces him to take the fight. There's also this scene where he goes into Zeus's private gym, smashes the gym up. There's a hologram of Zeus. He runs into the mirror. His finishing move is a double axe handle. When is the last time we have seen a double axe handle in wrestling? There is a good trivia question. When is the last time we've seen that, let alone it be a finishing move? The night of the big showdown, when Hogan's getting ready for the match, Samantha is kidnapped and brought into Brel's office. They call Hogan in his dressing room, say make the fight look good for 10 minutes, and then put Zeus over, basically. Because again, there's no difference between the no-holds-barred fighting and wrestling in this movie, which is cool. I liked it. And as a guy that's from the 80s, I was in grade 1 when this movie came out, or kindergarten. Anyways, my parents thought it was too violent. I wasn't allowed to go see it in the theaters because of whatever rating it had and my age at the time. My grandmother ultimately was the first person that showed me this movie. I got to rent it with her when I was sleeping over at her house, because my parents thought it was too violent. But my grandmother was a wrestling fan, so she didn't mind. Anyways, the fight happens. During the fight, Samantha manages to escape Brel because the security guards are paying too much attention to the fight. She makes it back down to the ring in time for Rip to see that she's safe, make his comeback. They end up fighting to the top of the stage, or the top behind the seats. It's a setup for the show very similar to WCW Saturday Night in the 90s, where it's like a studio setup. The match is taking place in a studio. So Hulk Hogan ends up hitting Zeus off the top of the bleachers through the ring. The poles cave in on top of the ring, and Zeus is out of it. Hogan wins. Then he goes to go after this Brel guy, who basically ends up electrocuting himself. And everything's happily ever after that. Of course, Zeus went on to feud with Hulk Hogan in WWE. Check out my full shoot interview with Zeus on this channel. I liked the guy in person. I actually was scared of him when I was a kid in WWE. He was very underrated as a heel. As a kid, he was a very believable heel. And at that time, 1989, all the kids watched wrestling. In the schoolyard, I remember everyone would play WWE, like literally 20 or 30 kids, and everyone would be their favorite wrestler. And I remember a lot of people wanted to be Zeus. Zeus was, people will make fun of him because he was limited in skills, but he was over big time. And personally, I liked him. He was good to me on and off camera. And I thought it was really cool that, like, he really wanted me to meet his girlfriend. Like, I did an interview with him. I ran into him again at a restaurant. He insisted that his girlfriend come over to me and meet me at this restaurant. Then later in the day, I was at the same Comic-Con. It was the Rhode Island Comic-Con a few years ago, and he saw me while he was at his table with his girlfriend again, helping him. And like, he called me over, said, "Hey, you want to do another interview?" So really good guy. Tiny Lister is his real name. There's somebody more deserving to be in the WWE Hall of Fame than Drew Carey. And I could argue that Zeus has been in more big movies than Drew Carey. He was in Jackie Brown that Quentin Tarantino did. All those movies that he played Debo in. I've actually never seen those movies, so it's not even coming to me. But I isn't it Ice-T that did those movies or something? I don't know. Friday. The movies are called Friday, but he's been on Walker, Texas Ranger. He was on Matlock. Believe it or not, I used to watch Matlock, and I remember Zeus had an appearance on Matlock. He was in Plane, Trains, and Automobiles. He was in a Michael Jackson music video. So cool guy, huge guy. Rumor has it he used to be a gang member too. Guy you wouldn't want to mess with. He fought Abdullah the Butcher in Puerto Rico. So he never trusted Abdullah the Butcher. He told me, and he says this in the shoot, he brought 2 armed guards with him to Puerto Rico, 2 LA police officers, because Brody had just been killed the year before. He said he was paid $20,000 to fight Abdullah. Abdullah was paid $5,000. They had the fight. I think it was a double count out or something. Zeus made sure he got paid before the fight because he also heard the rumors that Carlos Colon screws people over on pay, which in my experience was true. Don Keybells, yes, I have a VCR still because I've got a huge collection of tapes. Why not? Could you even buy those anymore? I don't think so. Jason Binks says, I saw a No Holds Barred in the theater. I was 8 and I loved it. Lord T. Addison says, I loved it as a kid, especially seeing Axe in another role. Jason did not like Zeus in the WWE. He was over. He was a heel. In a world where we have no heels now, he was a heel. And even if they're heels on TV, they're going to be outed as nice guys in the newspapers because everyone just completely breaks kayfabe now and doesn't care. They don't care that fans would rather you pretend it's real overall, and that would be more interesting that way. They'd rather break kayfabe every second that they can. Surprisingly, Brutus Beefcake had no role in this movie. So yeah, I found that a little weird. Joe LeDuc is also in this movie. How could I forget? He's one of the people that are fighting in the bar. Joe LeDuc, whose nephew Carl LeDuc wrestles for Great North Wrestling, part of the famous LeDuc wrestling family. He did not have a long run in WWE. He had a very short run, but it's cool to see he was in this movie. I know a friend of mine that might even be watching this said the last time he saw LeDuc was shortly before his death, and he was working in a pawn shop in Montreal. So he hadn't really saved his money, and he had alcohol problems, unfortunately, Joe LeDuc. Ziggy Pop says Zeus could have been in the main event of WrestleMania 6. That's what the rumor and innuendo is. Alberto Del Taco's obsessed with Linkin Park. I have to tell you, as crazy as you and your other names are on here, you actually, by continuously posting about Linkin Park, you made me put a Linkin Park song on my running playlist on my iPod. Monroe D says, if anyone wants to see a young Zeus, YouTube a movie called Prison. It's a cheap 80s horror flick with a very young Viggo Mortensen, cheesy but kind of cool. The worst commentator ever says he never watched No Holds Barred. Even as a kid, it looked corny to him. As a super absolute crazy wrestling fan as a kid, and there wasn't wrestling movies, there wasn't YouTube. It's not like that Vern Gagne, the wrestling movie from whenever the 60s was in video stores. There was no wrestling movies to my remembrance. So, like, it was really cool to me. Ben says Zeus has some funny lines in The Fifth Element. That's right. He's also in The Fifth Element. A couple more questions. Rio Cali says, "In the End" is a great song when referring to Linkin Park. It's not bad. It's not bad. Are you the same guy as Alberto Del Taco? Somebody thinks that you're Conrad Thompson with all the different names. So Piper enjoyed it. She was not born when No Holds Barred came out, but she sat through it and she enjoyed it, and she had some popcorn with me. So if you're a fan of the current product and you're a child of like the 2000s, this movie's not for you. But if you're a child of the 80s and early 90s and you liked the Hulk Hogan era of pro wrestling, you'll probably love this, because the movie also brings back a lot of memories of the 80s. You see the big car phone, you see the old school limo, no cell phones in the movie. The 80s, they actually use a lot of music similar to music you'd hear in WWE. Zeus's theme song is the same. So if you like wrestling themes, all the music in this is wrestling theme style music. So that's my review of No Holds Barred. My lovely tape. Is it going to last watching another time if another 10 years from now? I don't know. It's falling apart. Someone says they're going to have to watch it again tomorrow. It's been a long time. Have a good night or good